We're live.
Hello.
Ooh. Jingle, jingle. Hello, hello.
Jingle, jingle.
And a sort of merry invoke to you.
Yes.
A belated one.
A belated
Because obviously
one.
we weren't here
Yes.
last week when it was just after invoke, were we? So, yes. Yes. Did you have a good one, actually, for invoke?
Well, yes. It was very good. Very magical.
Yes, it was magical, wasn't it? Oh, we have echo.
Is that me or is that you? I'm not getting an echo at this end.
No, it was this end, I think. It was echoed at this
We
end.
have Tony
yes, so spring has sprung,
in.
kind of.
Ooh.
Well, winter's technically, doing its thing, but we're seeing the light. Have you noticed how much lighter it is in the evenings?
Oh, yeah, yeah. The last couple of days I felt of the spring vibe is definitely here.
It is, yeah. It's lovely, isn't it? When you see the first snowdrop in the garden or the first daff, it's like, oh, there you go, finally.
And the warmth, feeling the warmth
Yes.
of the sun and the fact that there's a bit of blue sky doesn't hurt. It's
yes,
very nice.
Exactly. I must admit, actually, I sat in the garden a couple of days ago and it was nice. I hadn't sat in the garden with coffee for ages, and it was so nice to sort of just sit and watch the birds and sort of watch them doing their own thing and watch the clouds meandering past. And it was nice, actually. And you could really feel the warmth of the sun. It was lovely. I mean, it was chilly, but you could feel it.
Someone's turned the volume up on the birds. They have
they really have.
Very loud.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, definitely. And this morning I was out the front door having a sneaky fag at about 4:30, I think it was. It's like, hello, hello. We have birds. We have birds, and they are awake.
Yes.
And why am I? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to be awake, but hey.
Exactly. I don't want to be awake. I'll go back to bed. So yeah, but it is nice. You know, the evenings, you sort of remember that it's dark by 4:00 only a few weeks ago, and then suddenly here you are 5:30, and it's not dark, and it's lovely, and I like it. So we got some people in. Who do we have? We've got Tony. Hello, big fat wave to you. And we've got Redwing. Hello, hope you're well this evening. We've got Hands in. Hello, Hannah. Hope you're really jolly good too. So yeah, and anyone else who can't say hello, cooey. And also if you're watching the cabbage. Exactly. So we've had a couple of witchy weeks off, haven't we? And we've been busy bees. I've been doing loads and loads of magic. Have you?
Well, a fair amount, I would say. There's been a lot of concentration, and it's because the energy's changed. There's, as we were saying, with sort of the feeling of spring, kind of, albeit we're very early and we can't say it's spring yet, but you start to notice the differences, and the whole energy switches around, and we're on a kind of a waxing moon. I thought I did said that wrong there. And so yes, it's very much a time for sort of magic, for growing things, manifesting things, thinking ahead to how you want your year to be, the spring, the summer, you know, what your thoughts and goals are. So yes, definitely a brilliant time for magic.
Yeah, absolutely. It was nice actually on the day of Invoke itself, on the Tuesday, because it was the first Tuesday of the month. That's the day that I run my moon. And it was a bit of a dilemma as to, you know, what should we do? We could do this and we could do that. But because it's been running for quite some time now, I try and avoid repetition as much as I can. And what was nice is that we did some glass painting, actually. And we had sort of candle holders, you know, tea light holders. And we had them, glass ones. And we were painting things, for the most of us, we were painting things with a theme for Invoke, you know, the return of the light and so on. And actually that was nice. And while we were doing that, we were sort of discussing all kinds of things. And again, it was just sort of bringing that that new energy back into the room and, you know, into the work that we were doing. And it was really nice, actually. It was quite therapeutic. So, yeah, it was nice. I managed to spill blue everywhere. So that meant that I needed to use quite a bit of blue in my work.
It's a lovely colour.
Always a mess. So yeah, so it ended up being a little bit more blue than I'd anticipated, but it's all right. Probably ended up with half of it in my hair as well, because that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes, isn't it? But yeah, so that actually was really quite nice. And as I said, you know, that whole thing of when you're out and about, whether you're driving or on the bus or wherever you happen to be, that whole thing of seeing the new green shoots on the leaves and on the plants, either poking up through the ground or on the trees and stuff. It does. It's, I don't know, it's almost like a feeling of hope, isn't it? It's nice.
Very much.
I love it, actually. I really
It's
do.
a whole sense of, it is very optimistic this time of year. And I know the weather can change. It can get very wintry again all of a sudden, but it has imperceptibly changed no matter what.
Definitely. Had some high winds though, but then what's been quite nice is that I've been utilising that with some magic.
Well,
can't beat a bit of wind to give some gusto to your spells. That's what I say.
On every level.
Yeah. Not that sort of wind, trust you.
Had to be said, had to go there.
Exactly. So we've got some other people in I need to say hello to. We've got Wibble Chicken. Hello, Chris. Hope you're well. And we've got Dawn Cherry Paul. Hello. Good morning. All the way over several ponds, all the way down under. We've got Red Collector. I don't believe we've met, but hello. And we've got Jen again from over the pond. Hello, all the way in the US. So, wow. How amazing. Hello. So there we go. Now, spell work. As I say, it's been a particularly spelly sort of fortnight for me, which has been quite nice. But it's taken effects on lots of different levels, actually, and for lots of different reasons. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about was, without going into too many details, I needed to return to my own self as a child this week. It was about a week ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And that was a really interesting exercise. But what I find really interesting about that particular thing is the whole discussion around, it's like a time hop, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And it is, because what I felt the need to do, obviously you were there, so it's slightly different, but what I felt the need to do to people watching was that I needed to visit my child, in other words, myself as a child, and give her strength for situations that arose at that time. But of course, that then brings into question the whole thing of time. And of course, we tend to think of time as being a linear thing, don't we? It's like it happened yesterday, that was there, and then might have happened 2 weeks ago, so that was there, and so that timeline goes back. But of course, speak to most scientists and they'll tell you that time isn't a linear thing, and it's kind of all over the place. So yeah, so what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that that's a viability to do that, and in what capacity? What do you think?
I from a psychological point of view, from sort of my experience as a therapist, which I don't currently do, but I spent a long time doing, I would say doing any work where you go back and deal with that part of yourself which is stuck in the child, because there's always a part of you that is that, and it does heal. It does help move things on. Obviously in the real world, or in our current world, you don't physically go back in time and change things, but you can change the feelings around things. You can change your sense of control and power around things, how you interpret things, and psychologically it helps to kind of reconnect the parts of yourself that might have got kind of disconnected, or there is a word for it, dissociated, parts of yourself, known and unknown, and often aspects of childhood that can happen. And as you know, some people don't, there are huge rafts of some people's childhood they don't remember at all, for all sorts of reasons. And that's a part of themselves that's become disconnected. So purely from a psychological point of view, it's a brilliant thing to do. Magically, and in terms of the kind of time travel aspect of it, I think it's also incredibly valuable, because I think childhood memories are in a way so much more vivid than an adult memory can be, because we're so much nearer the source of being at that point, and much more in touch with that side, the magical side of ourselves as a child, even though the world attempts to remove it from you forcefully, usually. So I think to go back and reclaim that and say, this is who I am at my core, this is my essence, I have childlike aspects within me that are perfectly reasonable to have as an adult, and useful and necessary and healing, and that's what enables us to do magic. If you haven't got an aspect of that, this sense of awe and wonder and magicalness, it's very difficult to do spell work. And the manipulation of time, I think we've spoken about that before, I firmly think comes under that remit. I do think there's an endless possibility that nothing is impossible.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. Because one of the things that that I would, on the back of that, was thinking that, if in that situation you find, sometimes you find an inner strength from somewhere or an inner knowledge from somewhere, that whole possibility of the fact that somebody has come along and said, I'm there for you, and you don't know who they are. It's that kind of, I know it's a bit film-like, but it's that whole, I don't know, I kind of like to think that there's that whole thing of somebody, if somebody's gone through something that was difficult, that they've got a strength from something that isn't necessarily from them. And it's that kind of thing. And you sort of think, well, because we believe in magic and because we believe in, the things that the majority of the population can't quite get their heads round, there are endless possibilities really there, aren't there? And I find that quite interesting. And that in itself is like, was that not achievable, but was that tolerable because of something else rather than it just being as it was? So it's an interesting concept, isn't it?
And the idea that sort of behind our everyday practical selves, you've got your layers of consciousness within you. So you have your subconscious, which I think is the thing that a lot of people are very familiar with, and a certain amount of magic will come from that because it's a very deep, primitive part of our brains. But then there are theories about how there's almost the Jungian thing about the collective unconscious, the fact that we are all connected beyond that and to what we would consider to be a much more magical space. Probably what you or I would call the astral is actually in that collective unconscious place, where all experiences, where time has no meaning, where everything is connected and joined. I mean, I absolutely wholeheartedly believe that and have experienced a certain amount of it. So it's absolutely true. And what Hans is saying there about piecing together the detachments of things that have happened in childhood, you're doing a lot of psychological work that I used to do, which is like a transpersonal form of counselling, which is a bit out there as far as most forms of counselling are concerned. It's very magical. Is about reconnecting with that and almost being there as your adult, but being there for your child. So you're helping yourself. Someone's not coming in and going, I'm making it all better for you. You're actually doing the work yourself, which means it stays, it works, it's transformative, and it changes everything.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Big girls really do cry. Hello. It is. I think it's absolutely fascinating, and there's all sorts of sort of segments to it and all sorts of different things. And of course, what I like about it is that there is no definitive answer, yes or no or possibly. There is absolutely not, because as many people as there are that will think about it, is as many answers as there'll be. But absolutely. I rather like that, and I like the fact that you can you can kind of work your way around it, and it doesn't matter how you deal with something. To an extent, it doesn't really matter, as long as if you need to deal with something, that you deal with it in a way that resonates with you. And I think that's the important thing, because it's the same. It's not a one size fits all, is it?
Oh, absolutely not. No, definitely not. But it's knowing enough about yourself and how you operate, and having the support of people who do understand and get this to guide you through it. That makes all the difference. And it's an ongoing process through life. You don't suddenly say, I'm going to do this and it's all done and everything's all like ducks in a row. It doesn't work that way. Things will spiral around again. Past stuff comes back to you. Whether you believe that's from a past life, which Lainey will know. Lainey and I have been starting a series about, primarily we're talking about death and dying and the grieving process and everything. And I tread very lightly when I'm there, don't I, Lainey? Because obviously I'm not going to come piling in with, most witches believe in reincarnation. I probably have a slightly different take on it to most people, but that's because of my psychological and personal experience. But that whole thing of being connected to all the souls that have come and gone and that exist is somewhere back in that collective unconscious, which is layers and layers behind us, which is also why I think deity, if you like, or whatever people think of as universal energy, gods, goddesses, whatever your flavour, I think that also resides way up there, way back in. We're connected to it through our minds.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And the more you dig, the more you find to dig.
Yeah, exactly. There's no boundaries to a subject like that, and what Lainey and I were also discussing is it affects life so much. The fear of death and what goes with it, and the pain or the uncertainty or the what's it like, really can stop people living.
Yeah,
which is also
it can. It really can. Actually, can't
believing
it?
in magic and knowing that you have a degree of power and self-determination and that you can change things, however small, is a massive, massive step to feeling that you've got some say in how your life proceeds, ends, happens. Well, life doesn't happen to you, you happen to it. And that's the best attitude to have, is I'm happening to life. It's not just happening to me, and I'm not just getting bimbled along in a tide.
Yeah. No, it's very important, isn't it? And it kind of gives you that certain sense of control over yourself too, doesn't it?
Yeah, because you can't control outside stuff, but how you react to things and how you feel, you have a measure of a degree over, and you can learn about yourself enough to be able to harness that.
Yeah, and of course that's where shadow work comes in, isn't it? Really learning about yourself, because if you don't know yourself very well, how do you know the best way to react to something? Because you do need to know yourself. So yeah, doing shadow work, I think, is absolutely essential.
Yeah, they're big areas. And I was going back through some of my psychology notes, partly because, like, you know, having this discussion, I've got to sit and read all this again because it was so long ago. I did it in the early noughties.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, is it a lifetime ago? And if I revisit it now, I'm a lot older, not necessarily a lot wiser, but definitely older. And
do you find that you've got much of a different viewpoint looking at it so far away, so from so long ago?
Not as different as I thought I would have. And I think because my previous life experience had kind of given me a lot of this information anyway. You know, when you're faced with, as you know, when you're faced with potential, your life could end a lot sooner than technically it's meant to. When stuff has happened to you that perhaps a lot of people haven't experienced at a certain age, then it kind of tempers you and gives you a certain strength, but does give you a slightly different take on things.
Gives you a different slant, doesn't it? Totally. Yeah.
And that slant is still very much there, in spite of that happening an awfully long time ago. But I know I've changed, which is why I want to go and look and say, well, do I feel differently?
No, I think it's such a big topic, you know. But I do think, going back to that, I think it is really essential to do that updating thing, but, you know, sort of to keep working on what you know about yourself and so on. And I think it's essential, really. And there's a lot of people that don't do that, and they think they know themselves, but actually they don't know themselves as well as they think they do. And I think and I think it's an essential
persona, the face that they present to the world is kind of like their own publicity, and you end up believing that is who you are, like that you're the job you do, or you're the people around you, the family that you happen to be with, or your chosen family, or whatever. You start to define yourself by things that are actually not integral to yourself inside.
Hans has made a couple of really valid points here. Saying about, you know, it's a real rabbit hole. And what's interesting is they put that it's, do you listen to the black wolf or the white one? So again, that's like, is it this or is it that? So yeah, you do need to know yourself in order to get the balance of that right. But also the healer always needs healing too.
Absolutely. Because half the reason people become healers is because they wounded themselves.
Exactly.
I mean, many people like that.
Ditto. So Jen says, I hear the phrase shadow work a lot, and it seems to mean a lot of different things. Would you explain a bit about what you mean when you say, I'm going to put this up, Jen? There we go, so other people can see.
Great question.
Okay, so what does shadow work mean to you, Heather?
Not beer. That's currently what I'm enjoying.
Not half a pint of gin either. Hello.
Half of it. It looks like a pint, but it isn't. Right.
Half a pint.
I think what it means to me, and my understanding of it, is working primarily with the part of yourself that you don't think is you. If you catch yourself saying, I would never, ... chances are you probably bloody would in the right circumstance. And why have you shut that part of yourself off? It's investigating the things that you project onto other people. So if you say, oh, well, I hate people who do XXX, you think, okay, have you ever done XXX? It's a kind of a following a counselling rabbit hole, really, which is to make people aware that quite often the very things that it can work both ways, but in terms of shadow, which isn't a negative thing, they're just aspects of yourself you don't know. So you're reconnecting yourself, making yourself more whole if you're actually acknowledging there is a side of yourself that you may not necessarily like.
Yeah.
Things we don't all like about ourselves, but you're not denying that it's there. So you're actually reconnecting with a very, very quite big and substantial part of yourself. It's very important inner work, and is a lifetime's work. It's not I've done it, I did it in a month's course. It's like, this is lifetime stuff, and it goes around and goes around.
Yeah, and it changes very slightly too, doesn't it? I also take on the additional. So I hear what you're saying. I take that too, but I also take on the additional stuff of it's those bits that you try and hide from other people.
Yes.
Yeah, you try and hide from other people, but they're lurking in the shadows. So that kind of stuff too, additionally, because actually there's quite a lot of aspects that a lot of us try and hide, but it's there. And as you say, it might be that I would never, and secretly you might under certain circumstances, but also there's certain things that you just couldn't even voice in that way, that, oh no, I need to keep that under my hat, in which case you need to explore that and say, why do I think that way, or would I do this course of action? So it's kind of like your hidden depths, which aren't necessarily, as you say, the nicer points, because we all most of us try and highlight our nicer points, don't we, and dumb down the ones that aren't so great.
But you must be aware of certain aspects of yourself that you don't like. But there's also a whole level of unconscious stuff that on no level do you even remotely collect it, and that's very deep. The sort of the very deepest shadow is the stuff that you absolutely would never, you're not even trying to hide it, it's so far away from you. But it's on all levels, and there is the thing of wanting to be seen to be a decent person, or a kind person, or a nice person, or whatever, but we're not all kind all the time, or nice, or you can't be. That's a two-dimensional way of existing, and it's very narrowing. So acknowledging, particularly, I think, as women, that we can get very angry, and that's not a bad thing. That it's a force for change, and not having it kind of like squeezed into a kind of passive-aggressive kind of form of anger. To be honest about emotions, it's really hard.
It is,
hard work,
because it's conditioned that we don't behave that way to an extent, isn't it? Certainly when you're as old as we are. Not maybe quite so much now, but
I think on some level it's still there, that people kind of feel they have to present and be seen as, probably even more so in this day and age, perhaps, that people have to be seen to be a certain thing, and then you'll find the story of some Instagram influencer, what have you, and then it all suddenly tumbles out there something completely different.
Exactly,
what
they're like to tread on frog's toes or something, and it's like, oh my god, that's awful. And it's like yeah, exactly. So but so that, hopefully that answers your question a little bit, Jen. But it is an interesting thing, and it is definitely one of those things that is never ever, it's like a bottomless pit, really, isn't it? Because you'll all suddenly discover something, you'll have a conversation with somebody and suddenly you think, ooh, that's not very nice. Don't look at that.
Might just go away and think about that.
That's one of those things as well, is it? I can't believe I said that out loud. It's like, ooh, might need to go and have a discussion with myself in a very dark corner.
Don't have a word.
Excuse me.
Well, we all do it, and sometimes it's just
I don't have a word with you, madam.
Yeah.
Yes. So yes, so there we go. So hopefully that answers that for you, Jen. I mean, obviously there'll be any witch that you speak to, they'll have a slightly different take on that, but that, it's, I think we're coming from the same basket there, pretty much, aren't we?
Yeah, I think so, pretty much.
Yeah, I think so. So on Saturday, I think it was, I did some very, very different magic, and it was urgent magic, and it was on the back of a trip to the supermarket. And whilst I was in, it was like one of these little express supermarkets. I was just picking up a handful of bits. And while I was being served, a policewoman came running in, and asked the cashier that was attending to me whether he'd seen a man and a woman and a little 5-year-old girl come in the last half an hour. And it was very obvious and very evident that it was urgent they were found. So he said, oh, well, no, I haven't. And as she turned to go, he said, oh, but I've only been on the till for the last 5 minutes or so. And I was quite upset that she didn't then ask to see the other person that had been on the till. Instead of which she just, hot-footed it out of the shop, jumped back in the police car, and off they sped. And I thought that it's evident and clear that this trio need locating urgently. So yeah, and so that's what I'm, hopefully helped to do, with the help of a friend, hopefully helped to do, to find her, because it was obviously obvious that she needed to be found. So so that was interesting, because the sort of thing that I had in mind, actually we tweaked it so that there were it ended up being a better alternative to my initial panicky thoughts of actually let's just send up a flare. They're obviously in a vehicle. Send up a flare so that they can be found. But actually it was tweaked. So rather than just having a flare, there was, dirty great flag on the car, and trackers on any clothing that they had, any changes of clothing that might have been utilised, and that kind of stuff too. But what was really interesting was that I have a little statuette that's got a sort of like a figurine, and it's got a little cauldron, and I like to burn a candle in that. It's kind of like it's a sort of a female figure, really, sort of like a gentle female figure in this cauldron. And I like quite, for things like that, the gentle stuff, I quite like to burn a candle in there. And what was quite interesting was that it was very much locating where she was, but utilising the police officer. And this is where friend's help came in handy, because rather than just trying to hone in on, a trio of man, woman and child, that could be anybody, using the energy of the police officer that had stood next to me and utilising her energy. She knew who she was looking for, even though I didn't. So it was using that, and then it's sort of carrying that forward to help locate. But yeah, so it was interesting. So using that energy, kind of managed to sort of look and see where they might be on various local roads. Luckily for me, I knew the roads locally. And so, sort of utilised that information to see where they were going, and like keep these, keep these things up and running. And it was quite funny, because after a sort of a dead spot, if you like, it was a pain in my cheek. And it was like, ooh, that's not good. And then there was this kind of dead spot where there didn't appear to be any kind of movement. And suddenly the candle in my in the cauldron of this little figurine literally jumped. It went boop, and it's like, got a good feeling about that. So yeah, hopefully it went some way to helping them all be found. Of course, it could have been a myriad, a plethora of reasons as to why they needed to be found, but there was a definite urgency on the police officer's face, and it's like you can't ignore that. And if you can do anything to help, then why not?
Yeah, no, brilliant.
So it was, but it was there was urgency in it, but it was it's just one of those things that was like, it's not interfering, and if it helps, it helps. If it doesn't, well, I haven't done any harm either. But I don't know, just had a good feeling that it had gone some way to helping. So yeah, so just don't, my point of it is, just because you're not necessarily there or party to something doesn't mean that you can't do something. So think outside the box as to what you can do to help. So yeah, but yeah, must have been, their families must have been very worried. That's all I can say. So yeah, it was yeah. But anyway, so that was something slightly different to my norm, if you like. So yeah, that was Saturday.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is that, I mean, the thing with that is you don't know. You're never going to find out whether somebody has been found or not. But it's right to do something, isn't it? And to attempt something.
Exactly, because something's better than nothing. And in the same way that, you know, lots of us get together to do stuff for climate change or putting out fires in Australia or all of that kind of stuff. It's that collective help, because if just one person does something, maybe not. 2 people do it, possibly not. 200 people do something, maybe, you know, and so it goes on. So hopefully there'll be, you know, various other people that were along the way to lend a helping hand in some way, shape or form, you know. So but it's, you know, it's just a different way of working, isn't it, and just trying to be helpful. So yeah. So that was different. I like different. I didn't like those circumstances, but I like different.
Well, it's a challenge, isn't it? And it does make you think on your feet, because as you say, you haven't always got, you can only do what you can do at the time where you're at, and then, as you say, you can come home and then try and do something else.
And of course, the thing is, when it comes to spell work, you know, in an ideal situation, you sort of think, well, yes, I'd like to achieve this, therefore I'm going to look at the correspondences for this, and I'm going to look at the moon phase and the day of the week. No, then that circumstance is just do what you can with what you've got.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you just have to. It's just as simple as that. But it was interesting, you know, sort of bouncing off the ideas in order to seemingly get it as right as we possibly could. So it's all you can do, isn't it? Yeah. But it was a strange circumstance, it was. So hopefully everyone is all well and good.
Well, let's hope so.
I hope so. Yeah, definitely. So couldn't find anything about it in the news. So
probably no news is good news in that sense.
No news is good news. Yeah, I like to think that too, and that's often the case, isn't it? Over years, you know, it's been interesting. So when my kids quite small, you know, anyone that watches this regularly knows that I have a lot of predictive dreams, and quite often, you know, I'll sort of wake up in the morning and be like, oh, okay, your friend so and so and so and so needs to be careful not to get into a green car or stuff like that. And it's like, you know, well, you know, because you sort of see this, and I sort of take it as a potential in the same way that you might do if you do a tarot reading. Obviously, predictive dreams, tarot readings, all sorts of stuff can come up. It's not necessarily that will have to happen. It's that potentially might happen in these circumstances. And if you know that those circumstances can lead to that, that's the point where you can twist them. And I'm a firm believer in that. And again, it's that whole changing destiny, I suppose, isn't it? But, you know, I do firmly believe that. And I used to get quite a lot of that, especially with my girls, not so much with my son, but especially with my girls and my girls' friends. And sometimes I used to get confused as to, you know, which kid was in whose class, to be honest. It's like, is it the girl with the long blonde curly hair in your class or your class? Oh, she's my friend. Oh, okay, we'll tell her to do this.
Wow.
So, yeah, that would be quite funny. You know, like, oh. So you can just imagine going off to school. My mum says. Be like,
I expect them to be careful about how they handle that.
In that situation, they'd have remembered. And that's the, and that's the point.
That's what you want. There's a decision point.
Yeah, exactly. It's that step back and think point. And if you produce half a dozen of them, good. If you produce one of them, brilliant.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Doesn't matter. And, you know, if people choose to think of me as a crackpot and take me with a pinch of salt, that's fine. Until they go, ooh. Yes. So, yeah. But it does pay off, you know, and time again, it's things that have, you know, proved themselves to be right, you know. And it's, if it was only ever once or twice and never been proved right, well, I wouldn't say anything and I wouldn't insist on stuff. But I used to make my kids promise, you must say this because. Okay. So yes, right. What have we got here? Hannah says, hope the little one gets found. Yeah, me too. Hopefully she was found on Saturday, and hopefully really, really quickly. Can always do something. It all helps, doesn't it? Yeah, it really does. And that's what I said, you know, it's, if you do something and it doesn't help, well, at least you've tried. If you do something and it just gives one clue to somebody or one idea, hey, let's try this, and it works, then great. It might not be a direct thing because clearly wasn't able to physically attach a Betty Great flag and a flare and everything else. Physically wasn't able to do that, because if I'd been able to do that, I'd have said to the police, they're there.
Yeah, it's not quite that simple.
But yeah, obviously it's not as simple as that. But as I say, even if it's one thing, let's try going down there, something out of the blue that makes somebody think, actually, what about that? And it leads to it, then yeah.
Yeah, it's that sort of intuitive part of the brain, isn't it, where you're doing something and you suddenly have an urge or a thing that says, I should go here, or maybe,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it can be as sort of practical as you like almost, but it's just that little thing of, I think I should do so and so today. Or
Exactly.
I think I need to see this person.
Yeah, it's giving somebody that, you know. So you know, I came up with what I believe to have been the make of the car and what the people looked like. So I was able to kind of, I think, focus on that and where they were going and so on. And as I say, it's just all part and parcel of it, really. And it's how my mind works, and other people's minds, I'm sure, work differently. But for me, that's what happens, and I visualise it, and it's like, okay, they're here, they're doing this. So yeah, but like you say, you know, if that then transpires into some policeman's intuition of, hey, I wonder if they've done that, and it leads to it, then good.
Well, exactly, by any means necessary.
Yeah, by all means. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, interesting stuff. So what else have I been up to? I've done a lot of fire magic, actually. That's been interesting too. Lots of it.
Well, it is our preferred medium, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. If in doubt, set light to it. Yeah.
Well, yes. There is that. It's very powerful, and I think it resonates. I mean, I like doing magic with all the elements, but the fire one definitely seems just so much more intuitive and a natural go-to.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's a candle or a honking great sort of conflagration of flames. Yes.
Okay. But I've been doing quite a lot of that this week, or last fortnight actually. And lots of different guises too. So it's, you know, as you say, there's been bigger bits of fire and smaller bits of fire, but for actually about half a dozen or more different reasons, it's for whatever reason has been the medium of choice to use that. And it doesn't always follow that way. Sometimes I'll choose other stuff, but I tend to use it in conjunction with other things. I've used like fire and wind, for example, this week. Fire and running water I've used a couple of times. What else have I used? Yeah, fire and earth once, I think. So yeah, so it's, you know, it's been the predominant thing, but then I use the other elements to kind of either balance it or just because it seems right. You know, it's just what's necessary at the time. But you know, then there might be that I'll go through a phase of not using fire for 2 or 3 months because it isn't appropriate. But yeah, it's almost always an excuse to use fire, to be honest. Yeah, call me a fire starter for nothing. Yeah. I've got that as one of my jingles on the radio. It's brilliant.
The fire starter.
Fire starter, yeah.
We all like a bit of prodigy.
It's like, yeah, what a jingle, yeah, fire starter. That'd be me. Oh dear. Yeah, but it has been good, and it's been interesting actually this last couple of weeks. I've had, you know, a couple of heavy weeks, to be honest, but you know, there's been some really good magic, and actually some of it, you know, I'm sort of already really quickly seeing good results from it too. And of course that's always rewarding. You sort of, you know, because so often you can do something, especially if it's for somebody else, and if you don't do stuff for people that you don't know or that you're not in contact all that regularly, you don't always get feedback. I mean, you might do if you've produced some kind of miraculous result in a short space of time. People sort of message you and go, wow, or whatever. But, you know, sometimes things work on a slow burn. So you don't always necessarily get to know the full extent of how, you know, you might sort of hear the first part of, oh, that was really successful. Let's wait and see how the rest of it goes. But you don't always get the full story. But of course, when you're doing it for yourself, then you get to see it unfold. And actually, this last couple of weeks, it's been really very rewarding. So I've had these quick results, which I like. So
nothing like quick results.
Yeah, they're nice, aren't they? Yeah. So yeah. So yeah, it's been quite full on, to be honest. quite nice to have a couple of days off. Do something slightly different.
I was going to say, yes,
just
take a little sabbatical.
Pardon?
Take a little sabbatical, yes.
A sabbatical, yeah. Mind you, as I say, what tends to happen is, 24 hours go past. I think, well, what can I do?
What can I do now?
What can I do next? I need to do something. Ooh, I could do that. Oh dear, yeah. Was it the devil makes work for idle hands?
Where did that come from?
I don't know.
No,
Somewhere in the bottom of this glass, I think.
Conditioning, it's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Oh, God.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, dear. So, what else have we been doing? In other news, what have you been doing? We've been drumming.
Well, yes, there was drumming and it was splendid.
Oh, God. That in itself is such a magical thing, isn't it? It doesn't matter what you're bashing, really. I just like to hit things with a stick, to be fair.
Well,
Set lights, women, hit things with a stick. It's a story of my life, really, isn't it?
Oops.
Not. Yeah.
Oh, dear. It's a lovely way to spend an evening.
What, hitting things with a stick? Yeah. Trouble is, I tend to make holes in it.
Well, that's because you bash too hard, love.
I know. I need to do something about that because I like hitting it hard. That's the thing. It gets rid of a lot of tension.
Good stress management, isn't it? Yeah.
It's stress management, but it means that I get through an awful lot of drum skins, which is a bit unfortunate, really. So, fortunately for me, they're not particularly expensive ones, but nevertheless, it's the faff of getting more and more and more and more.
Plus, you did have a bigger drum.
I did. Mind you, I started denting that. I know, but I dented that.
You nearly put a hole in that from the look of it.
I know, I dented it quite a lot. What is it? It was an absolute whopper. Do you know, I've got a whopping great bruise on my knee from that drum.
Yeah, it's so big that it sort of bangs into your leg. Yeah,
It does. So even walking around like a crab with your legs either side of it, that was a massive drum, wasn't it?
It was a bit. It made you look rather constipated on certain moments.
I've various people say that's not very ladylike. It's like, no, I'm not very ladylike, but I get your point. It's less ladylike than usual.
Quite comical in parts, yeah, and heavy. It
was heavy, but I said I've got a corker of a bruise appearing on my knee because obviously every time I moved, it just clouted me on the kneecap, which was a bit sore, to be fair. But yeah, but that is such a magical thing. I know we've talked about drumming before as a magical tool, but you can just lose yourself in it, can't you? You really can.
It's the rhythm, it's patterns again, isn't it? It all comes back to patterns and the fact that you're connected up with other people and the energy of it is collective. And I mean, it doesn't always go right. Sometimes it does go wrong. It's very disconcerting when you've got new people who are kind of off. It's like, whoa, mustn't listen to them.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's tricky when you get new people in, isn't it? And it's lovely that new people are coming in and they're so enthusiastic. But yeah, and you've got half in here sort of listening to what you're supposed to be doing, and you've got the other half in here going, that's not quite right. And then it is. But and it's lovely though that you've just got new people coming in, and that's what's so nice there, that everyone is always welcome, regardless of how good, bad, or indifferent they are. It's brilliant, and that's what I love.
Exactly. It's fun, and that's the thing. Is that we are still. I mean, there's some people are more serious than others with it. But I do.
Well, let's face it. We're all crap, and some are less crap than others.
Yeah, exactly. We're all enthusiastic amateurs.
Yeah, crap and enthusiastic in various different levels. Yeah.
Yeah, enthusiasm over technique, I feel.
Yes, exactly.
Mostly.
But it's all good. It's all good, and it's it's such a therapeutic thing. I just think it works a treat. So I enjoy that.
It's grounding, and it warms you up, and it gets your energy going, and it's just on every level. It's just brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
You found you said that you enjoyed like patterns and things. Does that mean that when you were little you used to enjoy kaleidoscopes? Oh,
hugely. Yes. Yeah. One of my favourite things.
Do they still make them?
Seeing patterns in clouds, I think yes, they probably do. So now you'll get a fancy sort of wooden one that costs sort of 50 quid from some fancy shop, whereas mine was like cardboard with bits of plastic in the bottom. But it didn't matter because it takes you to another world.
The shapes, the shapes. I used to spend hours looking at mine. I love them.
I was completely captivated by it. Yeah,
and you just like turn it and just a little bit and a little bit, it would just change.
It's like fractals, and the whole thing is completely absorbing, just magical really in itself.
Yeah, and it is. I used to look at them for hours and hours and hours. I find that really quite restful. I might buy one. I'm going to have a look on the internet when I come off here. I think see if I can find one because I love them.
I'm sure they're about.
Probably, but as you say, you probably buy them from some kind of the equivalent of the Early Learning Centre. I think that's gone now.
Yeah,
but it's horribly expensive now.
Yeah, I think I found one for Alex, but he wasn't quite as fascinated, was it, as I would have been at his age. No. But then they've got computers and things now, haven't they?
Yeah, it's a shame really because it's such a basic thing. It's just as you say, patterns and colours and shapes. But it's a shame when you've got technology takes things like that over, don't you think?
I suppose it does.
Miss out on those kind of things. It sort of seems to jump from just sort of like, oh wow, that's red, to let's play Minecraft. Like, what happened to the middle bit?
The Minecraft thing, because my son did very much get into that. It wasn't the fact that he wanted to go and shooting things up. It was the fact that he could build worlds, and that's what he loves to do in his head. And in terms of gaming, it's the creation process rather than necessarily the mechanics of it, although he'll learn that. But it's that creating worlds, and that's magical. However you do it, it is magical, and that's what he loves doing.
Yeah, it's building that parallel life sometimes to yourself too.
Oh yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah, having multiple universes that you exist in. Yeah. And who's to say we don't?
Exactly. Well, that's another bloody rabbit hole for a start.
Oh, I like the idea of that, where something happens and you kind of know if something had gone a different way, it'd take you in a totally different direction, but you didn't go there, you went there.
Yeah. It's that whole sliding doors thing, isn't it? Remember that film?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that one thing. And the butterfly effect as well, it's the same kind of thing, the ripple effect. So yeah, those two films I always found very, very fascinating because they resonated. Both of them really resonated.
Oh yeah, just the whole idea.
One change. Just that one change.
Yeah. Amazing, and in fact that happens countless of times even in one day. So how many thousands of sliding doors are there? Or the infinite universes theory, stuff like that always fascinated me, along with black holes and time travel through, stuff like that was my bread and butter of my childhood, really.
No, it's fascinating, isn't it? Absolutely. Right, what have we got here? Sliding doors and butterfly effect. Yes, good films. Love a good film. Talking of good films, I watched Harold and Maude yesterday.
I'm not sure I know about that one. Inception is brilliant.
You don't know Inception? Oh yes.
Yeah, I love that.
You don't know about Harold and Maude? Shame on you. Shame on you, woman. Go and look it up immediately. It's one of the best films ever made. You'll love it. You will love it. For those that don't know, I think it was made in 1965. And it's about a young man who's got a bit of a penchant for staging suicide scenes, who falls in love with an 80-year-old lady, or nearly 80-year-old lady, who's tiny but larger than life and loves life.
1971. There we go.
Oh, it's 1971. I thought it was 65.
Oh,
yeah, my numbers is wrong. But either way, you have to see it, Heather. I'm not going to talk to you next week until you've watched it.
Right. I consider myself told.
Your mission, should you choose to accept.
That could be tricky, but we'll try.
No, honestly, it's brilliant. It's an hour and a half of time, excellently well spent. It's hilarious.
And
she's a breath of fresh air, and he's just hilarious, and it's really touching.
I'm trying to find quirky movies that I can watch with my son, but that one, possibly not. I don't know, but he does like quirky movies.
Oh, I don't know. I think I first watched that with my middle daughter. I think she was about 13 or 14. First time she saw that, and we watched it together, and she laughed her head off because it's so off the wall. And you've got his mother, and you've got the most amazing characters. You really have. It's brilliant.
We'll have to give it a look.
Yeah, it's excellent. Can't recommend it highly. It's one of my all-time favourite films. So yeah, can't recommend it enough. And anyone else out there that hasn't seen it, that is your homework for next week.
Well, yes, we always have recommended ones.
Yeah, no, it's an absolute corker. It seriously is. I don't know whether it won prizes or whatever. If it didn't, it should have won every single one.
I had never heard of it.
Haven't you?
I had never heard of it.
Oh my God. Haven't heard of my favourite film. Fancy that. Anyway,
Well, I have now.
Too.
You have. I've been told.
That's your homework too, Heather.
That's much.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Good night, Becky.
And says before her time, I wonder, I'm not so sure. Oh dear. Well, Red Wing is off ski, and we're going to be off ski fairly shortly, aren't we?
Lainey hasn't heard of it either. Well, you've got to watch it too, Lainey.
Yeah, it's homework. Yeah, Harold and Maude. It's touching and it's funny and it's quirky and it's just fab. Yeah, it's brilliant. Highly recommended. I've seen it about 30 times. It's brilliant, honestly. I love it. Actually, that's an exaggeration, probably 20, but yeah, I've seen it a lot anyway.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Yeah. So, and you see it's one of those films that you see something extra in it each time.
Ah, right.
It's
I think one of the ones I quite enjoyed was Amelie. And we watched that with Alex and he quite enjoyed it.
Amelie, do you know I've not seen that? I know about it, but
your
I haven't
homework.
Seen it. Is that my homework?
That's your homework, is to watch Amelie.
Homework,
because it's weird and quirky and interesting and yeah, it's funny and it's touching and it's very culty and off the wall. But Alex, actually, my 15-year-old son, for those who may not know, trying to find a movie that he doesn't switch off at because it's predictable or not what it's set out to be, and he's not one for a film packed full of special effects because he's not.
Oh no, there's no special effects in this. It's unpredictable all the way through. I think Alex will love it. Actually,
I think he'd quite enjoy it. That's why my ears pricked up. I was like,
I think
we'd all enjoy
love it. I'd be very surprised if he didn't. Actually, so
Saturday night sorted then.
That's that sorted out. Then get your popcorn ready.
Indeed. Stella. I know. I've heard of the movie Stella, Hans. I've heard of that.
Stella.
Hans has mentioned that as a movie. Some famous actress in that. Really good actress.
Where's that then? I
Whose name
is Inception.
Yeah, down a bit.
Yeah, I haven't got that. Parallel universe. I've got. Oh, Stella. There we go.
Stella is awesome too.
Stella.
Yeah.
Not sure if I've seen that. Anyway, yeah.
Make a note.
Who'd have thought? Who'd have thunk it? Actually, ended up talking about films, but yeah. So,
but films are amazing.
Often watch telly.
But films are amazing because the ones that people relate to and like usually are playing out some aspect of the person's own story and their own psychology and the need they have and their, the links as to why certain movies connect with you. Yeah. At certain times, not always forever, maybe just for a certain period of time. Yeah. There's a massive whole world behind that. It's brilliant.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I hadn't thought about it in that way.
Yeah, I did a lot of that with the psychology because a lot of films have, especially the more interesting ones, have all the archetypes in and they have a certain way that flows through that works, and they usually have some resolution or redemption or something at the end of them. So they're all very psychologically helpful. Yeah.
I'm not sure that you'll find Harold and Maude psychologically helpful, to be fair.
No, I think I just find it quite funny. But the really big successful ones, like sort of, I don't know, the very early Star Wars or the Lord of the Rings thing, because they're big epic things that involve lots of characters.
Films, the hero films,
Yeah, sometimes, not always, but certainly the big epic things that are in a different world, in a different time, different place. And the way people relate to them and connect to them can be very interesting.
Yeah. Actually, I went on a course a few years ago. Say again?
Apparently, Chris thought Stella was a dodgy beer. And yes,
terribly dodgy beer, I reckon, yeah, if you ask me. No, I did a course a few years ago. It was excellent. And it was, the course was Finding Your Inner Hero. And that was really interesting. And obviously it was a course on self-esteem and self-respect and things like but it used lots of analogies of different films and the storylines of different films and who's a hero, who's the protagonist and all the rest, and who everybody else was, and it was that was interesting as a course. That was several weeks worth. But yeah, that was really quite interesting. It's quite an opener actually when you look at it from a different perspective. So yeah, interesting stuff. And you sort of, when you look at it, you can see where yourself fits in, where your own personal story fits in, and so on. So yeah, it's an interesting concept, isn't it? So
I mean, there's also a lot of work around things like fairy tales and stories, myths and things that somehow will resonate with you as well.
Okay, so I'm going to say toodle pip.
Yes.
And we'll be back next Wednesday, will we not?
We will indeed.
I think. Yes. Well, we'll see you next Wednesday. And thank you all for joining us. Cheerio, everybody. Have a great week. Don't forget to watch that film. Harold
Indeed.
Do it.
Harold Maud.
Awkward wave, Heather.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.